A report posted by New York Post has revealed George Soros' funding to a pro-Hamas group to the tune of $15 million. The Israeli ambassador to UN has raised this funding yet again, warning the world about George Soros and his web. Let's quickly listen in and remember, what is it that Elon Musk and our own Minister of External Affairs S. Jaishankar had said earlier in their warnings against George Soros. And then we discuss how do we tackle what seems to now be a threat to democratic nations. Listen in.
Mr. Soros is a old, rich, opinionated person sitting in New York who still thinks that his views should determine how the entire world works. Now, if I could only stop at old, rich, and opinionated, I would put it away.
He fundamentally hates humanity. That's my opinion.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, well, he's doing things that erode the fabric of civilization. You know, getting DAs elected who refuse to prosecute crime.
So there you heard it. Now we look at Soros's funding, not just to the Hamas, but other troubling developments related to the same. More than $15 million were granted to Hamas since 2016 as per reports. Now Soros's Open Society Foundation has given a $13.7 million grant to several institutions and groups that are working in a pro-Hamas fashion. Let's quickly keep this moving on and let's keep putting the information out there. Money was granted via the Tide Center, which is a deep-pocketed left advocacy group. So Tide Center is being used by Soros to funnel these funds to Hamas. Beneficiaries of Tides includes Illinois-based Adala Justice Project. And the Adala Justice Project, remember, posted a photograph on Instagram of this bulldozer tearing apart the Israeli fence. So this is the work that is being done by the Adala Justice Forum. And then, of course, Open Society Foundation has also given $30,000 in 2020 to Desi's Rising Up and Moving, another organization called Desi's Rising Up and Moving. We've been told that Desi's Rising Up and Moving co-sponsored the Bryant Park protest where 139 people were in fact arrested. Some other troubling associations of George Soros. Open Society Foundation gives $60,000 to Arab American Association, which has been co-founded by Linda Sarsour. So let's go across to more information. Linda Sarsour planned sea protests in the Bay Ridge area is what we've learned. So she's planned the Flood Brooklyn for Palestine protest in the Bay Ridge area, and Jewish Voice for Peace, who have been holding Israel bashing rallies, have also got $650,000 from the Open Society Foundation, as well as other means through which George Soros operates. So this is what's happening. Remember, just a few months ago, George Soros made certain allegations against India that did send alarm bells. Then, of course, his association with the whole Adani scandal that broke out in the nation. And now, of course, we're learning that George Soros's Open Society Foundation has been funneling money to pro-Hamas groups as well. What do these developments really mean? We take this conversation forward. Joining me on the broadcast, I see in the studios is Joyita Basu with us, editor of the Sunday Guardian, Savio Rodriguez with us, Pathikrit Pen, and Professor D.K. Giri. Joyita, let me begin with you this conversation. More and more information about George Soros continues to pour out. Clearly, a lot of people do not agree with the foundations, with the societies that this man wants to support. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is his money. What is it, however, that needs to be done to ensure that men such as George Soros, who have the funds and who clearly have certain inclinations, they don't go about creating chaos in different parts of the world?
Well, I think in this case, at least when it comes to India, it is India's responsibility to ensure that this man, I mean, at least expose this man. And what he is doing to the this particular cause, this pro-Palestine and anti-Jewish, actually it is frankly not even pro-Palestine, it is now pro-Hamas. And the thing is that this man is extremely toxic. He is a millionaire or a billionaire, and he has a lot of money to spare, and at his old age it seems like he has nothing better to do but to spread a lot of anarchy. He has been doing it throughout his life and throughout his career. He has done it, and he is continuing in that vein. I mean, he is going around supporting a lot of toxic elements all over the world, and the thing is because of him, he believes that he can be a kingmaker, he can change the course of the world. But then let's hope that, you know, what we can do when it comes to countering Soros, you have to ensure that you expose his links, especially when I'm talking about India. You have to keep exposing his links. You have to send the message to the people that there are many, in India's case I would say, political leaders and parties who are hand in gloves, who are in cahoots with Soros. And the thing is that, as Mr. Jaishankar said, he is a very dangerous man with a lot of money, and the potential, the harm that he can cause to a lot of countries, it's unlimited. So you have to be very wary about it. You cannot stop him. You see, I mean, your law, you can exercise your laws up to a point, but beyond a point, he will definitely find ways and means of, I mean, funding certain activities in whichever country he is targeting. But the thing is that you have to be constantly vigilant, you have to constantly expose him. The government has to be on its toes to basically find out what he is up to.
Okay, Pathikrit, bringing you into the conversation. Pathikrit, what is it that needs to then be done to counter men like George Soros? Because like I said, it's his money. At the end of the day, he's giving it to foundations. One thing, of course, we can do is expose the foundations and the sort of groups that are getting this money. What is it that they're doing with that money? But ultimately, that's not going to stop him. There is a clear need to clamp down on this sort of digital warfare that these organizations end up unleashing. What is it that, as per you, can be done?
Well, I think the government of India is doing quite a bit of work in this area. For example, under the FCRA, when you actually impose certain restrictions of many of the NGOs who are funded by the likes of George Soros and who, in the name of doing social work, creates anarchy, fuel needless resentment against any kind of industrialization. So, that is one step that the government has taken. Secondly, of course, exposing is a very, very important work. These elements, can you imagine a person who donates $1 billion just to fight nationalism? For him, nationalism is an anathema. I mean, he wants what? A world where no nation would exist. I mean, that kind of a scenario is horrendous. So number three, of course, we need to understand one thing, Devika. Is he working alone, or is he a front of somebody else? I mean, he sits in the United States and does all these things against the strategic partners of the United States. What are we expected to believe? I'm not saying that the government of the United States is directly responsible for it, but they always had a hands-off policy with the whole issue. They never thought that it would be important to tell him that, look, you cannot harm the interest of those countries who are strong allies of the United States. Fourth, he has always been a short seller in the market, in the financial market. Now he's short selling the future of many countries. We need to also target those companies in which he has investments. I'm sure there are many companies, who operate in India, or maybe some are based in India, with a considerable amount of, sizable amount of investments, either directly through him or indirectly through him. And fifth, it's very important, unfortunately, in humanities, what we are taught, and many of the institutions, not all, in the universities, you create a certain kind of mindset which creates this presumption that when the Western NGOs are doing something, it must be right. This illusion, this halo that has been created about Western NGOs, I think that is very important to be broken. I personally, if you ask me, this is my opinion, I see no reason why you need a humanities department in the IITs of the country. That must stop. In the name of humanity, many of these elements actually teach things which are not needed, which sometimes are on the borderline of something which is not good for the long-term interest of the country. Does it mean that you're clamping down on freedom of speech? No. This country have always had diversity in political views. political parties come and go. There is no problem with that. But when you actually, allow elements to propagate things and which is considered part of normal discourse, that's only when these NGOs come in and they do the work, what they have been doing. And people were, I've seen youngsters at one point of time very happy to work with Greenpeace, not realizing what Greenpeace was doing in the name of advocacy, the kind of work, challenges, impediments they were creating for any kind of industrialization in the country. So I think it is a multifaceted challenge, and you have to deal with it at several levels. The government is doing its part in terms of clamping down to the FCRA. The media is doing its part. I think institutions, educational institutions must also make people aware, young generation aware, what these elements do. And let me tell you, unfortunately, be it George Soros or be it some other countries with considerable amount of fund, they have done it for a long time. It isn't something they're doing for the first time. Many of these foundations have always been alleged to be front of deep states of certain countries. Regime change in today's era where you can't fight a full frontal war, regime change games or anarchies or these orchestrated protests. You see what happened in the case of the farm law protest. It was, it was eventually found out the kind of money that was poured in from the West. Look at what was done in the Arab Spring. George Soros linked organizations had a lot to do with the Arab Spring, which almost pushed the whole of Middle East into a chaos. And it was done through social media. Fortunately, Elon Musk came and a lot of things have stopped. But that time, the whole Arab Spring was also called Twitter war. Everything was instigated based on hearsay to create such kind of problem, which eventually destroyed countries like Syria. So what Elon Musk have said that, about George Soros, I think that the best definition of what he is and what Dr. S. Jaishankar has said. But this is an evolving problem. This problem will not get solved only with George Soros being clamped down. Somebody else will come up. And that is the game that the West has played for a long time. My last point, I was watching a program today on YouTube about a person who was the first president of independent Congo, Mr. Lubumba. He was, killed, by a sham of a trial. And because he was talking about Pan-African nationalism, because he wanted Congo's resources to be used for the benefit of people of Congo. And that time when he was killed, when he was, sentenced to death, it was presumed that, it was such a great justice. But eventually there were neo-colonialists sitting in Europe, pulling the triggers, pulling the strings to make sure that these countries continue to be what they are in terms of helping the Europe or the West to flourish. And we see that happening even today. So I think George Soros is an indication of the problem, not the entire problem, because tomorrow in place of George Soros, somebody else will come up. Corporate cartels have a long role to play in all this. We must not forget that also.
Right, absolutely. Let me bring in Professor D.K. Giri into the conversation as well. Professor Giri, what do you make now of these allegations that have come about against George Soros, and what is it that we must do to tackle the sort of operations, and to be honest, they're not even that clandestine anymore, the sort of operations that this man is running?
George Soros has been exposed. I mean, we don't have to do much to expose him, but ironically, he organized an open society forum or something. We remember Karl Popper's famous book, Open Society and Its Enemy. Enemies, actually. So he's the enemy of the open society, and a very funny name. You see, I would say that government of India should take up the case with the United States. United States is beginning to harbor a terrorist and the supporter of the terrorist. They take the Panus case, they say he's our citizen, you are planning to kill him, but he is a terrorist. They will go out and kill others, like Bin Laden in Pakistan. But when we talk about a terrorist, it becomes the honored and dignified citizen of America. So I think a strong message should go and a protest to be made to United States to freeze these fellows' assets. It is clear evidence that he has been funding organizations not only in Palestine, elsewhere. But take the case of Palestine, because Hamas have been designated as a terrorist organization by United States. And if this fellow is funding these organizations or the organizations supporting Hamas, then these fellows should be taken to task. So why United States, it is their contradiction of their democracy, but the countries across the world, democracies across the world cannot be held hostage to George Soros antics. So I think Israel has done very well, and it is a close ally of the United States. And likewise, India also should protest with the United States that they should really take a clear line on terrorism or supporting terrorism. You see, but NGOs will operate, like Pathikrit. I will not tar all the Western NGOs with the same brush. There are some devious NGOs creating problems in other countries, but there are other international development organizations which are doing good work as well. It is a kind of global solidarity on development, and it's a globalized world, so we should help each other. And there are genuine NGOs, but there are certainly baddies, and they should be segregated, and they should be called out. But coming back to George Soros, really his assets should be frozen by the United States so that he cannot fund any more
yes, but Professor Giri, on what basis? On what basis are they freezing his assets, right?
Well, because he's clearly supporting, if the link is established, that the organizations he's funding are supporting Hamas, and Hamas is a terrorist organization. The United States and Europe have called Hamas a terrorist organization. So it is clear, when you support a terrorist organization, your assets have to be frozen. It goes against the government policy, the policy of the government. So it is international, I mean, by law it is possible to do so. But terrorism is banned by United Nations, by any democratic country. You cannot support terrorists. And Hamas, we have not designated Hamas as a terrorist organization yet, but the United States has done it. That is why.
Okay, Savio, bringing you into the conversation, would you agree with Professor Giri that there some pressure that has to be created in order to look into what all is being funded by George Soros, and some method has to be found then to cut that funding somehow? Or do you feel that that's probably not going to work given the sort of the scale at which this man is operating, and we must look at other methods and other ways out of this entire situation?
I have said this repeatedly, and I will say it again, because I'm probably one of the few people who studies George Soros very intently. George Soros is an economic terrorist, and he will continue to remain to be an economic terrorist. George Soros is a Jew, and here's the reality. As a Jew, he continues to support Hamas and continues to support the Palestinian cause through Hamas, which again is wrong. So how do you bring down a guy like George Soros? You don't bring down a guy like George Soros by shutting him down, because there will never be a direct linkage of George Soros to a terror organization. George Soros is always funding NGOs. NGOs have got linkages, like let's say the Council of Indian American Relationships, CAIR, of that nature, CAIR. So you have Open Society Foundation funding CAIR, funding HHRs, funding various other organizations, and funding them in millions of dollars over a period of time. But they get money from Open Society Foundation. They are NGOs that do the advocacy for pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine work. There is no direct linkages to terrorism. So why is he called an economic terrorist? He's called an economic terrorist because he creates an anarchic situation in the economy in order to destabilize a country, in order to affect its stock markets and thereby all currency, and thereby gains by it. That is why if you look at 1992, 93, all his history, you see he works with destabilizing economies. And that's exactly what he wants to do with India. Now, let's say, for example, there's roughly about 90 million he's invested in startups in India. And I was tracking a lot of these startups, and the uniqueness of these startups is that I think George Soros and his people are looking at data. Which are the areas where his startups mostly work? They work in Punjab, they work in Haryana, they work in the agricultural belt. They're working and trying to find out data. And why was the farm laws, organizations that came forward to oppose the farm laws, they do have linkages as far as funding is concerned to a George Soros organization. So he never does anything with the intent to terrorize an organization in the true sense of terrorism. But he is an economic terrorist, and he only cares about money. He doesn't care about a cause. He doesn't care if you're black, you're white, you're Indian, you're Jewish. He doesn't care. What he cares about is, can I make money out of a situation, or can I create a situation where I can make money out of? And that is exactly what George Soros has been doing from the time he's coming to prominence. Now, how to bring George Soros down? You bring George Soros down by going after the NGOs that are funded by George Soros. And once you stop funding, once those NGOs stop getting funding, the intent of George Soros' anarchy stops till he finds the next set of NGOs to back. And that's how you go after a George Soros. George Soros doesn't care. Even his statement at Davos against India and nationalism of $1 billion is because any sort of nationalism, any sort of identity goes against his theory of open society. Open society primarily means being without a border.
Yes.
Right? That's the whole idea of it. So he wants an open society. He wants a land without borders. That's what he wants. He wants to create a complete situation for people where they are completely living in anarchy.
Savio, we seem to have lost your video there, but important points there kept across by everyone. We've actually completely run out of time as well. I thank all of our panelists for joining us to take this very, very important conversation forward, because this is not the first time that troubling reports about George Soros have come out. This is probably not going to be the last time. But how are we then preparing ourselves against this remains to be the big question.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.